Okay, so Andy, thank you again for taking the time to come onto the podcast.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me on, Johnny.
So, just for the listeners who may not know who you are, could you just give us a brief overview of what you do at the moment and, who you are?
Have you not just already given me the marvelous introduction that you
Uh,
just promised that you would do prior
that,
to this recording before I was to come on? Wow,
yeah,
this isn't very
I've
professional, is
really
it?
talked you up. I've really talked you
Yeah,
up in the
you've
intro,
really
but
talked me up. Okay, so in addition to what you've talked me up about, I'm how can I say? I'm a collector of stuffed animals caught in grabby catchy machines that actually work in Japan.
nice.
I'm a Brummie, as you can clearly tell from my accent. Um, well, I've been away for the last 14 years living in Japan, but I did used to speak a little bit like that.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, 14 years in Japan. What else might be interesting to wait? Hang on. What kind of podcast was this? Fitness and
It's fitness and
nutrition and
nutrition.
training.
Yeah,
Um, I've written a couple of books with Eric Helms and Andrew Valdez called The Muscle and Strength Nutrition and Training Pyramids. I've been an online coach for 8 years now, since summer 2011. I've had the opportunity to work with a lot of people one-on-one. I work through email, and I absolutely love that. I write about those experiences on my website, ripbody.com. And the really that gives meaning in my life. I love what I do. And I want to just help as many people as possible escape from the quicksand of industry BS that is everywhere. I think it's a lot better than it was 8 years ago. There's a lot there's a lot better information resources out there for people to not get scammed and suck it in. But yeah, the internet is a weird place where we're getting more and more pushed to the extremes, and people don't want to kind of hear each other. So I'm just there as a website with pretty long and serious articles to catch people once they've fallen and are now interested and will see the value in long form content and understanding what they're doing instead of looking for gimmicks.
Sure.
And the reason for Japan, well, I'm still here primarily because I've now built a Japanese website, and we try to help make the fitness industry in Japan a better place, because we're English speakers. We get to have access to more knowledge, higher quality information than any other speakers in the world, because the scientific literature is all published in English.
Yep.
People in Japan, they don't speak much English. They're certainly not reading English language articles if they're interested in nutrition and training, the average gym bro, right? And so that leads to a lot of nonsense out here in particular. And so I started a website to try and address that.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah, great. Yeah, well, thank you. That fits perfectly with the dashing introduction that I gave you. And
Thank you.
obviously, as you said, you've been coaching now for 8 years, with both guys wanting to get lean, wanting to get jacked, and that's what we're going to talk about in today's show. So I think with the starting question would be, when does a guy know what route he should take? Because I think there are a few people out there that, if they have got a fair bit of weight to lose, they know that they should start with losing some body fat. But you get some guys who are maybe skinny fat, and they're like, right, well, do I cut this? Do I just try to put on muscle first? What sort of checkpoints do you look for when you decide what direction they should go in?
Well, it can be difficult because it's not always clear cut, and everyone on the internet has an opinion. Ultimately, you have to look. There's what may be practical, there's what's realistic, and then there's as long as it's practical and realistic, then there's what you want to do. So let's say you want to get bigger, you want to get bigger in size, then it doesn't matter if someone says you should cut, eat your way up into a bigger size. As long as you're not pushing things to the point where you're getting fat, pushing, that body fat boundary into, I won't say obese, but, getting up there, where your belly is hanging out more than your chest, let's say, that wouldn't be a good idea. But don't let people push you into doing one thing or another. I try to listen to what people want to do, and then I help guide them, and say, well, I think we should do A, B, or C, right? Or A, then B, then C. So if someone is overweight, then I would say to them, yeah, cut. The decision is pretty simple, go in a fat loss phase. If someone is skinny, and they would describe themselves as skinny and other people would describe themselves as skinny as well, then that's clearer. You want to eat more. Then you've got people that they don't consider themselves well muscled. Maybe they haven't been training for very long. They've got some fat on their belly, perfectly normal, and they're not happy about that. And they find themselves in this trap of not knowing what they should do. For these people, and this may sound a little strange from someone who gets people to count and track in quite a lot of detail, but I think for those people who are fairly new to training and fairly new to getting their diet right, just listening to hunger cues, training really hard, and making sure you're getting in adequate protein in your diet, if you haven't been already, is probably going to lead to some good changes for a fair few months. I mean, let's face it, most people who train do not count their macros. They do not count calories. They do not pay that much attention to their diet. They are going by their hunger cues, and they are achieving good changes. So I think most people would benefit from just trying that first, rather than going down this route of trying to count everything.
Sure.
And then if you get stuck, then that can be the next step to choose. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah. Keep it as simple as possible, especially if you're new to training. Make sure you eat enough protein, eat your vegetables, listen to your body, and train hard. So
yeah, exactly.
Simple advice. And so when you take people through, let's say you're taking them through a fat loss phase then, and they've come to you because they have got stuck, I'm guessing then you are saying, right, well, to be as on it as possible, we need to be tracking our calories and macros. How do you make that as simple as, I guess, for people to make it easy for them to stick to?
Yeah. I like to use I like to suggest that people have purposeful simplifications in the way that they count things. This works for a lot of people. It doesn't work for all people. Because when I say, hey, in your rice, you're going to count 100 grams of raw rice or raw pasta as 70 grams of carbs, because that's roughly the carbohydrate quantity in that.
Yeah.
And we're not going to bother counting any of the protein. And then some people are like, what? And it blows their mind and they can't handle that, right? Well, what I'm saying to them is, look, we're going to have some purposeful simplification. So your green vegetables, yes, they do have fiber, and you are going to have some carbohydrate. There is going to be some energy that you are going to be able to take from that. But you know what? Let's ignore it. Let's make the counting simpler. So let's just count our starchy carbs. Let's just count our protein. Let's our meat servings. Fats, I want you to count them all. But we're going to have these purposeful simplifications in there. You're going to build out, say, 4 to 6 meals that you enjoy, that fit your macros and calorie needs. And then you're going to rotate them. And you're going to keep to those meals. And maybe you could build them up to 8 meals in the end, or 10 meals in the end, and you're going to keep rotating them. And then if you get to a point where we are not progressing in the way that you want, we're going to say, okay, now we're going to cut out, and this is just examples, by the way, 50 grams of carbs from each day. And then they can easily remove 50 grams of carbs each day. I'm not going to say to them necessarily, right, I want us to go down from 2,200 calories to 2,000 calories. I'm just going to say we're going to reduce by 200 calories, because the actual caloric intake that we're taking in may be wrong.
Right.
But that doesn't matter as long as we are within the ballpark and we're making adjustments relative to the baseline that we've got.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. And you're being consistent with the method that you're using.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's really interesting. So when you're working with a client, you're not actually necessarily telling them the calorie amount. It's more of a case of, let's build these meals which have these certain macronutrients, and you know as a coach what the calories are, but you're kind of withholding, well, not necessarily withholding information, but not necessarily disclosing it either, because you're getting them to focus on a meal by meal basis as opposed to their total for the day.
Well, I am telling them what macronutrient targets I want them to hit. I'm just saying, you can purposefully simplify that. So actually the carb amount you're taking in may be 10, 20% higher, but let's not worry about it as long as you're consistently not counting your carrots.
Yeah, cool.
Or whatever, right? Yeah. Something like that, right? Yeah. Or we're consistently not counting the trace protein that we have in the rice that we're eating.
Sure. And
this works great for some, but some others just cannot handle that. They're like, oh, no, I need to know exactly what I'm putting in. And then a decision needs to be made on whether weaning them off of that is going to be better for them mentally, or whether just, letting them roll with that is better. Because, different strokes for different folks.
Yeah, we've got different personality types, haven't we, in terms of data and how much they actually need to know and what they like to do with their information. With that process, then I guess, so many people focus on, we know the priorities of our overall adherence is the most important thing. And then we've got calories, we've got where we put our protein, and meal frequency and timing is very low on that list. But with these people, do you talk to them about meal frequency? Is it a preference? Do you try to keep it as few meals as possible when people are dieting? How would you work that with someone who was going through a fat loss phase?
Yeah, so if I can take a step back, the way that most people find me is they Google a specific pain point about training or nutrition, and then they find my website. Then they read through the articles on the website. They get a good feeling for me. Maybe they've clicked the coaching page or the results page, and then they're like, interesting. They read that page. They're like, is this something for them? Yeah, I think this is something for them. And then they click on the application, and then we have a conversation. Like I get them to answer 13 questions just so I get a very good feel of where they're at, and then I can make a suggestion on what to do to get where they want to be, assuming that their goal is a realistic one, which it will be if they've read the site enough, really.
Yeah.
And then I'll make a prediction on how long that will take.
Sure.
And then if someone's if they're in that situation we kind of came to before, where they're like, oh, should I cut? Should I bulk? What should I do? Then maybe I help solve that riddle for them.
Sure.
So if we were to, and I will come back to your question, but let's say we've got this person, let's say 15% body fat, let's say, for example, and they really want to put on some muscle, but they're concerned about gaining more body fat. They like the way that their clothes are currently a little bit tight. They don't really want to have to buy new pants, new trousers or jeans. Then I'd probably suggest to them, okay, well, how about we cut down to 11, 12, maybe 10% body fat, and then we bulk up from there. Because that way you're going to stay, you're going to be 5 months into the bulk, you're going to be in a leaner position than if we were to start that bulk right now. So maybe that's preferable to them. And I like to keep these cutting and bulking phases between 10 and 20% body fat, just to get a little more technical for those people listening who might like that. Over 20% body fat, and there can be adverse health outcomes. Under 10% body fat, and it's generally not that conducive. You can get under 10% body fat and stay there if you like. And if you can handle that, some people can, some people can't. There tends to be trade-offs with life balance. There is also different people have different hunger signals that happen at that point. But when you want to move into a bulk, under 10%, it's not, your body's not generally in a particularly anabolic environment, and you want to, you wouldn't want to say cut down to 5% body fat and try and bulk from there and always stay under 10%.
Sure.
There's a reason that physique competitors do not sustain ridiculous body fat levels, regardless of what their Instagrams may claim.
Yeah.
So all the people that are coming to me, they know that I work with people, they've read my writing, they see my recommendations, they know that they tend to be simplistic. And, they know that I tend to have a focus on simplicity of execution without compromising the results. So I'm all about doing the simplest shit that's going to get you what you want, because that is what is easier to adhere to, right? Now, when it comes to diet phases, I will generally suggest to people that they have 2 big meals a day, skip breakfast. Let's keep it simple. 2 big meals that are going to keep you, they're going to satisfy your eyeballs. They're going to make you have that stretch reflex on the stomach at the time that you're eating. And then you're going to have this large portion of the day in the morning where, boof, you're not even thinking about food anymore. Hunger pangs will come and go, but your body's just going to get used to it.
Yeah.
Intermittent fasting style, in the sense of a 16-8 Martin Birkin type breakfast skipping, right? If I suggest that to people, very few people are surprised, because I've read it in the testimonials. They will have read me talk about it on the website. Now, that is not the only way. I do give them the option of having a breakfast. I just say, hey, this really works for a lot of my clients. You can do it this way if you would like. It's pretty good. Not for everyone, but it's pretty good. How about we give it a go, right? Now, if they are then to say, let's train in the morning, then I'd want to give them some protein prior. And maybe some after if it's very early in the morning. And if they were, say, having a lunch at 12 p.m. and then they're training at, say, 6 p.m. and then they were going to have their dinner at 8 p.m., I might have them slam a small protein shake at 5:30 or 5, just to, how can I say, cover any possibility that there may be a benefit for that. So that there are enough amino acids swimming in the bloodstream at the point that they are training, which there probably will be anyway, because your lunch will still be digesting. So my focus is on simplicity. And then in bulking phases, I'll say to them, look, the research isn't quite clear on this yet. It may be more beneficial to space your protein out more in the day. So a breakfast may be something that you want to include. So consider that. But if you're not going to feel good doing it, and it's just, or it's another step of complication, then don't do it. Don't worry about it. We're talking about likely a very minor thing here anyway. Does that answer the question?
Perfect. Yeah, as you said, it's about keeping it as simple as possible to adhere to, with the big blocks being in place. As I said at the start of the question, if you're training hard and you're eating the right amount of food for that dieting phase or for the bulking phase, then the amount of meals are down to what you can stick to and what you prefer. Some people will prefer fewer, larger meals, and others will prefer the opposite. So
and
no right
I tend to have a bias. I see the people that end up coming through to me for coaching, and the people that come to me through coaching tend to have read the website, and I have written about intermittent fasting on a few of the articles. Therefore, I attract people who are open to that. Therefore, in my mind, I think I'm skewed more towards that more people are open to it, and perhaps is reality, but you know, like,
That's okay though, isn't it? I mean, because
yeah,
at the end of the day, the people who are coming to you know what they expect to get, and then it suits the bias of coach, you know, the slight bias there that you like. You know, you've seen this work with so many people. They're open to the idea because they've seen the results and they've read about it, and they're like, yeah, cool, let's try it because I've not tried it before. Or they want you to guide them through it so they know they're doing it right. And that's, you know,
exactly.
at the end of the day,
Exactly. It's no
perfect.
one comes to me and asks me to program them Olympic lifts or
No,
calisthenics,
no,
right?
you're very clear on your site about
Purely
what you do.
as a program. It's like,
Yeah.
you know, that's not what I know best. If that's something that you want to excel at, choose someone who excels at that. That's not me. Although I appreciate that you respect my knowledge enough to come and ask that of me. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's great. I think what I would like to ask then is you talked about a little bit in one of your earlier answers was about adjusting through a fat loss phase and saying, right, okay, well, when we need to make an adjustment now, it's as simple as just taking away some carbs or some fats, depending on what the preference is or what you think is best. But when you're measuring a fat loss phase, I think this is where a lot of people trip themselves up, is maybe making an adjustment too soon or making an adjustment that's too large. And I know you've got a very extensive site on article on the site of measuring progress, but just to talk people through it briefly that are listening to the show, I'll obviously link that article in the show notes. How would you work with someone to say, look, we actually don't need to make an adjustment now because the measurements have done this, we're still on track? Or how do you say, right, now we need to make a drop and this is what we're going to do?
Yeah. So I think if we back up, what is the problem? The problem is that people, when they want to lose fat, all they think about is the number on the scale going down? Yes, no. If no, cut calories. And they don't have a framework for when the answer to that is no. So what is that? Is that from morning to evening? Well, that'd be a really shit idea, but because you're going to have more food in your gut by the end of the day. And you're also going to wake up dehydrated, or slightly at a lower hydration level because of the moisture that we lose when we breathe. So then it's okay, well, then are we comparing like yesterday with today? Or there can be fluctuations in there because of the diet, or maybe we haven't, I haven't been to the bathroom to have a number 2 yet today. And wow, I'm probably going to be, I don't know, I'm full of shit, me. So I'm going to be probably 3 kilos heavier, right? So, maybe I don't want to compare with today and yesterday. And it's like, okay, so now do I compare this day last week with today? Well, that might not be a good idea because of the same issue there. You do get some fluctuations in water, retention, gut content, muscle glycogen. And so then it's like, okay, well, do we look at the average across the week? Do I weigh myself every day? And then look at the trend line. And it's like, well, you're going to get bumps. So then what do we do? Well, what I get people to do is I get them to weigh themselves every day, log an average at the end of the week, and then compare the weeks. And that way you get to see whether your weight is coming down or not at the rate that you are targeting. And then you have the answer to the first question, which is, am I losing weight at the rate I'm targeting, yes or no? If the answer is no, the answer then is not just cut calories. Okay. So then we go on to decision tree branch 2. So it's like, okay, well, why might the no's be other than, well, I'm eating too much? It's like, well, okay, let's assume that your diet adherence has been really good. So a counting error is out of the question there. Why might you not be losing weight? Could you have some water retention? Are you sleeping well? Are you stressed? That can happen. You could hold on to water for weeks, I've seen. It's weird, but it can happen. So if you're highly stressed or you haven't been sleeping well, I'd go and fix those things first, I would say. Then what you need to consider is, so let's say those are in order. And so the answer to that is yes, sleep is fine. Stress is fine. Do we then cut calories? Well, no, not necessarily. I would get people to look at their stomach measurement data. So I get people to track at the navel, and then I get them to do about 2 inches above. So 3 fingers above, 3 fingers below the navel. And I get them to track to the nearest millimeter. And what do those measurements say over the weeks? Are they trending downwards? If the answer to that is yes, are they trending downwards still at the same rate that they were before? Well, if so, then you've got some muscle growth at the same time that's been happening. Right? So you want to have a look at that measurement data as well. Now, let's say that has stalled as well, like you're not having any reduction in the stomach measurements and your weight loss has slowed, then you want to make an adjustment to your calorie intake. And typically I would cut 150 to 200 calories from a person's daily intake, and then track over the next few weeks and see how things go. If the target rate of weight loss was then to be higher on average again than we are targeting, then I would add a little bit back in.
Sure.
Because remember, we are targeting a specific rate of weight loss for a reason. That is to keep it sustainable, but also to make sure that you are not going to lose muscle mass while you are dieting. But hopefully, as long as your training is there in terms of effort and volume, you should be fine. And as long as you're not losing weight too fast, and which would be between 0.5 and 1%, I would say, of your body weight per week. As you start to get lean, where you think your abs might start to come out, or leaner, then I would keep that at 0.5%. So if you're an 80 kilo male, then nothing higher than 0.4 kilos. So that's just under a pound for anyone who thinks in pounds. And then you want to obviously keep your protein intake high. But I'm assuming that people who are going to go to this level of detail are looking at that. But most people, they don't think about these things and they get themselves in a pickle. And dieting is a really emotional thing. You can wake up one day, look at yourself in the mirror, and you're like, oh, I look a bit like my leanness is kind of gone. And that could be because of some water retention under the skin. It could be because the mirror's just screwing with you. It's because your brain is screwing with you, because there's this perceptual adaptation that happens, and that can get people as well. So by relying on data when you're making decisions and setting rules for yourself before, you get away from any kind of emotional pull that is just going to lead you into a slash calories, unsustainable hole that you're just going to rebound out of.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, I think you're totally right. A lot of people who do this themselves, they always just want to. We're in a generation where people want everything now, if not yesterday, and so people will try and do extreme things, and then if they don't see progress based on the scale, they'll make it even more extreme. So as you said, having some stricter rules around data, some decision tree analysis type work, and also not starting too aggressively with I love that idea of setting targets of weight loss. I've talked to a few people about that as well, where 0.5 to 1%, depending on how much weight you have to lose and how lean you currently are. I think that's perfect, because a lot of people do just think, right, well, let's just get it over and done with. But if you want to maintain muscle mass and train hard, it's just not going to work.
I stole that idea of the percentage decrease from Eric Helms, actually, who I wrote the Muscle and Strength Pyramid books with. I like that more than the heuristic I used to go with, which was at this rough percentage of body fat, you want to lose, let's say, 1.5 to 2 pounds per week, or 0.75 to a kilogram of weight per week. I think this works better because it's scaled to body weight. You don't have to try and estimate body fat percentage, and then also, smaller humans. You're not screwing over anyone that's exceptionally large or particularly small.
Yes, yeah, it's perfect. Yeah, it's a good sliding scale to use. And as you said, you don't then need to get into the issue of trying to calculate body fat percentage or estimate it, and because people get into all hopes of bother with that, whether which measurement they use and whether they use photos. And I think it's definitely a good scale to use. With that, then when we've got someone going through a fat loss phase, I mean, you mentioned earlier on about keeping certain phases to certain lengths of time.
Hmm.
When you've reached the end of a fat loss phase, what's your take then on getting them out of it and back to maintenance? Because you've written a good article about reverse dieting and your thoughts
Mhm.
on it. And, I'm sure there is a lot of hype now on the gram around this whole, like, let's just add tiny calories back in, like metabolic adaptation, metabolic damage, that kind of thing. And I think there's probably a lot of scaremongering around that, for want of a better word.
Yeah, so notepad and pens ready? Just kidding, there's a back button. So you can rewind 15 seconds, I know. Right,
No,
so
it's a good idea. Get your phones out, guys. Get ready to make some notes.
if you're interested in metabolic damage, I've got an article on the site called Metabolic Damage Isn't Real, but Relative Energy Deficiency Syndrome is.
Yeah.
Um, Ooh, that could go down a can of worms. Let's just, that's one that you could read.
Yeah.
And there are two other articles on reverse dieting that I've got. One is kind of talking about the reverse dieting myth.
Mm-hmm.
The other one is talking about coming back to maintenance after dieting,
Mm-hmm.
which is a deeper how-to practical guide to finding maintenance after dieting or then moving into a bulk.
Mm-hmm.
But I can cover that for you fairly simply right now. The reason that I titled it The Reverse Dieting Myth,
Mm-hmm.
what I'm particularly focused on there is this idea that you mentioned, Johnny, about people very slowly adding back in calories, 50 a week or something? I don't know.
Something, yeah, like 10 grams of carbs a week or something like that. So it'd be about 40 calories,
Yeah.
40, 50 calories.
Yeah, so if you do that, let's say that you've been losing a pound a week, so half a kilo a week, pounds or kilos. What do we use at home anymore? Right.
Yeah, British people use kilos mostly. You get
So
some people still trying to use stones and pounds, but it just, kilos
stones
is the
mess me
way.
up. Yeah. Okay. So
Yeah.
let's say you've been losing like half a kilo a week, and then
Mm-hmm.
you want to finish dieting. Well, adding in just 50 calories isn't suddenly going to mean that you're out of your caloric deficit. We want to reverse. We want to get back out of this deficit as
Mm-hmm.
quickly as possible, so that your body can adjust and recover as fast as possible. We don't want to prolong the misery because you'll
Mm-hmm.
just keep on losing weight. There's no evidence to suggest that bumping up your caloric intake very, very slowly over time is going to enable you to eat more over time and not get fat. That's what people are trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the practical way that I suggest people do it is, let's say they've been losing half a kilo a week, then they need to 700, 1100, 500 and 1100, yeah, 550. That's a 550 calorie deficit each
Yeah.
day.
Yeah.
And so I would just add that back in immediately. I
Right.
would wait a couple of weeks. I would then add back in, let's say you're just trying to find maintenance. I would
Mm-hmm.
see where your weight is at over the, okay, let me explain this again. You've been dieting, you've been losing half a kilo a week.
Yeah.
That means you're roughly in a caloric deficit of 550 calories.
Mm-hmm.
That is from your current energy needs. If you add in 550 calories, you would maintain your weight,
Mm-hmm.
assuming that your metabolism did not adapt
Yeah.
while you were dieting, but unfortunately it has.
Mm-hmm.
Let's put that aside for a moment. When you eat 550 calories more each day, you're going to have more food in your gut on average each day. You are also going to have more glycogen stored in your muscles, which comes from the increase in carbohydrate that you're eating each day. Therefore, your weight may actually experience something of a bump.
Mm-hmm.
Because of the muscle glycogen, the water, and the gut content.
Mm-hmm.
That is not fat, but people freak out and think that that is fat. So that's where this idea of teeny weeny increments comes from.
Yeah.
However, you will still actually be in a caloric deficit at that point, because your metabolism will have adapted a little bit to move yourself back up to its regular hormonal function level.
Sure.
So when we diet, the body adapts. It changes certain hormones so that we require less food. It's an adaptation that was intended to stop us from starving during times of famine.
Mm-hmm.
These adaptations flip. They go back and they bring you back to the normal level.
Mm-hmm.
So if someone is chronically under eating, they could be chronically under eating and maintaining weight,
Yeah.
but their hormones will kind of be a bit messed up.
Mm-hmm.
That's something called relative energy deficiency syndrome,
Yeah.
REDS.
Reds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is what I talked about before.
Yeah.
So if you think that might be you, then it's probably worth reading that article, and we've got some things pointed out there for people to kind of check against.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would just make that caloric bump, and then I would bump it up by, let's say, 100 or 200 calories more.
Mm-hmm.
2 weeks after that. The reason 2 weeks after is because you're giving your body like some time to adjust.
Yeah.
So that you're not just you're suddenly having a big wodge more food.
Yeah.
And then I would just keep tracking your weight over time and see how it does. If it's nudging up slightly, pull back. If it's nudging down slightly, add a bit more in.
Mm-hmm.
At that point, you could then see perhaps, oh, well, can I add a few more calories each week?
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's try adding in another 100 calories this week and see maybe another 100 calories, right? You could do that then, but it's not the first step to do.
No, right. Yeah, perfect. It's a perfect example. As you said, people use this step-by-step increase because they're worried about a weight increase. Whereas, as you said, if you've been dieting at that rate per week where you've got a 550 calorie deficit and you add those back in, it's like you've not now jumped into a massive surplus and you're going to put on a bunch of body fat. But people worry about that spike in body weight because they're so sensitive to changes in body weight now. And you have to say, look, it's a small spike. It's like as if you've gone on a night out or a holiday or whatever, and it's going to drop back down, because most people in a weight loss phase will have experienced that as well. And you just say, give it a week or two, it'll come back down. You'll be eating more food, you'll be maintaining. And then from there, people can say, right, well, actually, could I eat 100 calories more and still maintain weight? Because the interesting thing about bumping things up after you've got to maintenance in a controlled fashion is actually, can you improve the amount of natural NEAT that you're pulling out? Can you improve the amount of energy you use at exercise and all these other things? And it puts you in a better stage to then say, right, I'm ready to bulk as well, I guess.
Yeah, and that's the other thing. Like, a lot of people, they're not looking to just maintain. They are interested in then gaining muscle.
Mm-hmm.
So then, being in that slight surplus, it serves, well, both functions really. The question is then, well, do you want to be in a more purposed surplus so that you're gaining a specific amount of weight on average per week?
Yeah.
Which you can certainly do. And I've got an article on that as well. It will be how to bulk without getting fat.
Yeah.
There's a bit of a lie in the title because you are going to gain fat when you bulk. I would say that a 1-to-1 muscle to fat ratio, if you gain, that's pretty good. In a pound of muscle and a pound of fat, boom, happy days. That's a pretty good ratio, I'd say. Gaining muscle without any fat is just not something that people generally achieve. So it's not something you should probably set as your goal. So if you've got a goal of gaining, let's say you are an intermediate trainee, and let's say, right, novice trainee, They're like brand new to training, maybe, or very early doors in their training, they might gain 1.5% of muscle mass per month of their body weight as muscle mass per month. Well, then maybe you want to set your actual body weight gain as 2.5% or 3%, because you've got to take into account that some's going to be fat, unfortunately. Then if you're an intermediate and let's say we're talking 0.75 or 1%, then maybe you want to double that as well. And the more advanced you get, the slower you're going to accrue muscle mass, the slower your potential is, because you're reaching your genetic ceiling then. And so the slower you want to take it, the more patience is needed.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, because otherwise you're just going to get massively fat, which is what no one wants. Yeah, perfect. As well as you said, setting yourself a bit of a target of weight gain at least then makes the bulk purposeful. I guess you could get to some people who get to the end of a phase of their fat loss. Maybe they already had a fair bit of muscle on them, and they're like, actually, I'm happy kind of maintaining slight surplus, maybe a bit of gaintaining is actually something that Alan Aragon coined at a conference I saw him at a few years ago. But with that, then I guess the last question would be, and again, I know I'll link the measuring progress to the site. Measuring muscle gain must be it is a much more difficult process. And requires much more patience as well, because it's not the same as fat loss where we're making pretty much visible changes week on week. So what would be your process to saying to someone who was looking to bulk, right, we're going to be looking at these points, if these go in this direction, we're on the right track?
Yeah, no, it's a tricky one, really. I'm in the fortunate position where my clients trust me. And so if I say I'm looking at the data and what I see looks about normal, about right, then they trust that. But I can't pretend to have come up with a heuristic for X amount of muscle gain looks like this in terms of centimeters of change.
Right.
Unfortunately, if you think about it, when we're losing fat, most of that fat for dudes is going to be stored on the stomach. We're going to have some around, the arms, the legs, the chest, and the back. And I get people to measure on their chest and back. So that's 1. The navel above and below. So that's 4. Their arms and their legs. So that's 8. And if we do the waist, then that would be 9. So that's 9 measurement sites. And as they diet, they will see that their arms will go down as well and their legs will go down. So this gets people used to the idea that the limb measurements and the chest and back measurement go down, not because of muscle losses, but because of fat losses. And, if you take your right arm, you reach around underneath your left armpit and pinch your back right now, everyone's got some fat just on their lat. This is going to be burned off when we diet. But what you will notice when you diet is that more will be lost on the stomach than it will on the arms. And that's because we store more on our stomachs, or for ladies, also butt and in the thighs. And so when we bulk, it's important to bear in mind that some of this fat is going to go back onto the stomach and thighs and butt and arms and legs, right? So let's say we lose 10 pounds of fat. That is probably going to look like about 5-ish centimeters of 5 to 6-ish centimeters of losses on the navel or above and below from 2 of those measurement points. What does muscle gain look like in terms of measurement changes? That's a super hard one, man, because muscle is being put on all over the body. Not like fat, which is mostly coming off of a couple of areas and a little on other areas, right? So if I think about this, let's say that you dieted, you took 10 pounds of fat off yourself, and that led to let's keep it simple, a 5 centimeter reduction. on your navel and your lower stomach measurement point, right?
Mm-hmm.
Let's say that you then bulk and you gain 10 pounds. If your stomach measurement in those 2 points has gone up by 5 centimeters, that is not a good sign, right?
No. Yeah,
So
yeah.
kind of looking at the data in that way can help
Yes.
give us clues.
Yeah.
Really what I do is, are they training hard? Are they sleeping right? Are they keeping stress low? Is the training progressing well?
Mm-hmm.
How are these stomach measurements changing? Is it creeping up, or is it coming back up at a rate that I would expect if we're... Does it look wrong, basically? Does it look like the reverse of dieting,
Mm-hmm.
the same speed? If so, then we're doing something wrong. It's rare that that happens, but some people are more genetically gifted than others.
Mm-hmm.
Some people just cannot gain as much muscle as other people, or whether it seems to be slower, or there's different things that we need to try for them. But
Yeah. No, it's perfect. I think, as you said there, it's comparing the data to each other and what it was in the phase before, because at least then you've got an idea. Like if your stomach measurements are just going up and up and up with your weight, you're like, yeah, maybe this is going the wrong way. Maybe I need to train harder.
The will. It's important to underscore that there will be some fat gain. It's unavoidable.
Yeah.
And that's okay. That if you're trying to, people get themselves stuck. So there's that trap of not knowing whether they should cut or bulk.
Yeah.
Once they're past this newbie phase where you can achieve both.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're wondering whether, am I in a newbie phase or not, then, well, you know what, just eat at a level of caloric intake with enough protein and train really hard, so that you're maintaining your body weight.
Mm-hmm.
Do you drop fat off? Are your stomach measurements going down? If the answer is yes, happy days, keep doing that.
Yeah.
Right, when that stops, okay, now make a decision.
Mm-hmm.
Or when the rate that happens is no longer at a rate that you are satisfied with and can stay motivated with, now you need to make a decision. Are you going to be in a caloric deficit or surplus, right?
Yeah. And I think that's usually where people get to before they start thinking about this thing. Because as you said, novices, they just like train and eat and good things happen. And they're like, this is great. I love it. And then you get to intermediate and advanced. And that's when you need to be a bit more specific. But that's perfect. I think we've covered a great deal for everyone to get their heads around. Obviously, you've mentioned the site a few times, rippedbody.com. Where else can people find you to see more with what you're up to and what you're doing?
Rippedbody.com, basically. Just go there. One thing I'm working on pretty damn hard right now is delighting people that join, that give me their email address.
Mm-hmm.
I give them a diet setup guide along with a macro calculator, and then follow that up with a 5 email sequence of how people generally screw this up, and so the pitfalls to avoid. And then I've been working on this automation where people get emails twice a week.
Okay.
And I've been trying to predict the point at which people get stuck with certain things. And so I'm going to deliver that email at that time.
Okay.
So this is kind of a geeky thing for myself, but I've interacted with so many thousands of readers over the years that I think I've got it down.
Cool.
So I just want to make it something that people look forward to a lot.
Cool.
So if you want to find me, find the books, find the Instagram, then just rippedbody.com. You can see everything there.
Perfect. Yeah, great. And as I said, I'll link the specific articles we talked about in the notes as well for everyone, so they've got direct links there too.
Thank you, John. Yeah, if there's one thing I think I'd like people to take away, is just measure. If you're happy with how things are going, then don't worry about any of this, right? But when you're not, then let's get more purposeful in what you're tracking, so that you don't fall victim to emotional decisions.
Mhm.
Make them based on data, and that way you will get to where you want to go.
Perfect.
And be able to make the changes necessary to help you get to where you want to go.
Yeah, through use of data and evidence.
Perfect.
Yeah,
exactly. Evidence, right?
exactly.
It's something that's we just make shit up nowadays, don't we?
I know. Well, as you said, luckily more and more of us are on the evidence curve now. So hopefully we'll continue to win the fight.
Yeah, the evidence curve. I like that. Yeah, the
Great.
curve.
Well, it is, isn't it? It's going up. So good to great. Thanks again for coming on, Andy. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me on, Johnny, and thank you for listening, guys.